Welcome to the poster, Myth Busting About Inclusionary Practices, All Means All in Washington State. The work that we are sharing is part of Washington State's response to a problem of practice that families and staff were repeatedly hearing across the state regarding the inclusion of students with significant cognitive disabilities in general education classrooms. The presenters today are Tania, Assistant Superintendent of the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction in the state of Washington, Gail Ghere with the TIES Center, the National Technical Assistance Center for Inclusive Practices and Policies, and with a particular focus on students with significant cognitive disabilities, and Cassie Martin with the Haring Center for Inclusive Education at the University of Washington.
Washington State has been on a journey toward greater access to core instruction in inclusive settings for students with disabilities. The Inclusionary Practices Project, or IPP, has shown a positive impact on LRE1, meaning access to general education for 80 to 100% of the school day. But we've seen a slower impact on LRE3, more traditional self-contained classrooms. In talking with partners, we uncovered several repeated, persistent myths about including students with significant cognitive disabilities. Through these discussions, we uncovered an opportunity to confront these myths and remove these barriers. Some of the common myths about inclusionary practices in Washington State include the cost of inclusion, who can provide services, student quote unquote readiness for inclusion, along with considerations around curriculum, family involvement, how disability impacts placement and assessment and academics.
We felt that if we just shared the fact that countered the myth, that would be insufficient for making the change we wanted to see. We needed a different approach. The table on the left of the slide shows how we organized each myth-busting response. First, we listed the myth. Second, we listed the fact that directly corresponded to that myth. Third, we added the truth is section. And that took the myth and fact and addressed ideas that were heard that were sustaining these inaccuracies. For example, in myth one is including students with significant cognitive disabilities costs more than educating them in segregated special education settings. One truth is item is that students with significant cognitive disabilities do not always need a one-to-one support to be included in general education classrooms, a belief that is increasing the educational cost for the student. Next, we added resources and links that provide evidence that support the facts. Lastly, we added a section on strategies for dispelling the myth. These were actual steps that schools and districts could take to address the myth. On the right side of the slide shows an example of what one of the myth pages looks like. Much different than a policy paper, the document has a feel of superheroes. It used bright colors, red, green, white, aqua, and yellow, to reinforce the superhero motif and to catch the user's eye.
Washington's Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, OSPI, the TIES Center, and the University of Washington Haring Center for Inclusive Education, and the Inclusionary Practices IPP Professional Development Cadre collaborated to disrupt these myths with facts about inclusion for students with significant cognitive disabilities. This collaboration included TIES, UW, and OSPI creating the content, and then all the organizations from the IPP cadre worked together to disseminate the information after collecting feedback from both the Washington State IPP Advisory Board and from IPP cadre members. The cadre and other partners were also instrumental in disseminating the information through social media campaigns that also included a collaborative effort by coordinating messaging across the cadre. So what about our results? What have we learned? OSPI has learned that district leadership is now more comfortable addressing and not perpetuating the myths when they hear them. Families are very interested in the resources and are taking them to IEP meetings and asking more questions. While the myths and facts is only one piece of the whole IPP priority, Washington's 2021 data continues to show impressive gains in LRE, including reductions in LRE3. Thank you for your interest in our myth-busting document. You can see a link on this slide where you can find it in its entirety, and for considering how you might use it and for imagining and taking action to leverage partnerships to transform your school, district, or state, and to show how inclusive education works for all students.